Good day, dear friends. This is the second day of our Holy Week. And as I promised, today we're going to very briefly look at why we say that Jesus was not crucified on the Friday. Remember the Pharisees, they came to Jesus and they challenged him and they said that you need to do a sign. Give us a sign, and this sign will show us that you have the authority on what you are doing. And then Jesus said to them, they are an adulterous generation, and no sign will be given them except the sign of Jonah. Now, even that is a problem, isn't it? Because so many people nowadays have many reasons why the story of Jonah cannot be true, and people have the idea and saying that a whale, the throat of a whale is too small and it cannot swallow anybody. The problem is that the Bible never said it was a whale. He said it was a big fish. What kind of a big fish? I don't know, the kind of fish that swim in the sea, I suppose. But it's simple like that. The Bible never told us what fish it is. It was just a big fish. My problem with that is if you cannot believe the story of Jonah, you will never believe the story of Jesus. But Jesus said, the only sign that will be given them is the sign of Jonah. What is the sign of Jonah? Jesus explained. Said, as Jonah was 3 days, 3 nights in the belly of the fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days, 3 nights in the belly of the earth. Now, if Jesus was crucified on the Friday, well, how many days it is? I've heard people explain, it says, every part of a day in the Jewish culture counts for a day. That's hogwash. It's nonsense. It's not true. All right, that's a lie. But let us kind of just live with that and see for a moment whether our maths can work out. I'm not a mathematician, so I cannot claim to be a master in maths. But my maths tells me that from a Friday evening till a Sunday morning, you cannot get 3 days and 3 nights. Because it's the Friday and the Saturday, that is one evening, 1 day, and then the Saturday night. So we have 2 evenings, 1 day. Sunday morning, when the people came to the graveside, it was empty. So that is impossible, unless there was another day. Another problem scripture was simply when the church leaders came to Pilate and they said to him, we want to secure the grave of Jesus. When did they go? It was the day after the Passover. And which day was that then? Because, if it was the Sabbath, was there a day between the Saturday and the Sunday that week? So there are many problematic scriptures if you say that Jesus was crucified on the Friday. So when was Jesus crucified? Let me explain to you this way. The people who came to the graveside, Mary, when did she come there? The Bible is clear. The first day of the week. We know the first day of the week is Sunday. Was Jesus risen on the Sunday? No. The Bible doesn't say so. The Bible says that the grave was opened on the Sunday morning. Nobody actually saw the actual risen of the Lord. The actual event of him being raised back to life. We know that when they looked into the grave, they saw what? In the grave? An angel, isn't it? And then Mary saw Jesus where? In the garden, already risen. But nobody saw the event and when Jesus was risen back to life. So if Jesus said that he would be in the belly of the earth 3 days, 3 nights, when was he raised back to life? When was he crucified? Let us look a little bit and look at how this thing could work out. The scripture reminds us in the Gospel of John, as we read through, that the Sabbath they are talking about in the crucifixion. Remember, Jesus was crucified, and at the 9th hour when he died, they wanted not to leave him on the cross because the next day was a special Sabbath according to the Gospel of John. So it was not the weekly Sabbath they were talking about, it's the special Sabbath. Which special Sabbath? You need to read Leviticus chapter 23, and it will explain it all to you. I can give you a better explanation, but for the purpose of this, I'm very briefly going to run through it so that you can see. Jesus was crucified on the Wednesday. On the Wednesday evening, which was the eve of the beginning of the special Sabbath, which was the Thursday, which was the first day of the unleavened bread. Remember, the Passover was not a special Sabbath. It was a special day, but it was not seen as a day for not working. Why? Because they had to prepare. It was called the day of preparation. All right, so they had to eat the Passover. The next day was the first day of the unleavened bread. It was a high Sabbath. Nobody would work. That was the Thursday. The Friday morning, they went to the governor and they said, we need to secure the grave because these people are going to steal the body. So nobody could get to the grave. The Saturday was a Sabbath and nobody would walk and go to the grave on the Sabbath. And then the third day was the Sunday morning they got to the grave. If you string it all out and look at it, you will see that Jesus was crucified on the Wednesday. So he was at the grave on the Wednesday evening and the Thursday. That was one day. The Thursday evening and the Friday was the second day. The Friday evening and the Saturday was the third day. 3 days, 3 nights. My own take on this. I cannot prove it from the scriptures, but I don't believe that Jesus would have been in the grave any longer than he needed to. So I believe that he rose early on the Saturday evening. But the people discovered it only on the Sunday morning that he was alive. I cannot prove it to you, but I do believe that he was risen back to life on the Saturday evening. Right, that is just to explain that very briefly, why I'm saying what I am saying, so that those of you who are not part of our church will understand it. For those who are part of our church, we've had an in-depth teaching on this about 2 or 3 years ago, but just a reminder of what we've heard. We now continue with our Holy Week series, and we're looking at Jesus being arrested, and then we read there in the Gospel of John, chapter 12, then the attachment of soldiers and the commanders and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him like a criminal. They bound Jesus like a criminal, and they brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. So they bound him as a criminal, and they brought him to the high priest in the middle of the night. A strange idea, isn't it? Because the priests, it was unlawful for people to be in court in the middle of the night. So this whole court and arrest and trial of Jesus was actually unconstitutional according to the Jewish laws. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachers. Why did they question him? Did they question him to find out more about the beliefs of Jesus? Did they question him to find out what is it that Jesus was saying? No, not at all. They were questioning why? To find out whether they could catch him out, whether they could find an excuse to execute him, to kill him, to crucify him. They've actually made up their minds. This is what they want to do. They want to kill Jesus. They didn't want him to live. They were fearful of him. They were afraid of his teaching. They realized that Jesus was exposing them for who and what they were, and they did not want that. So they wanted to kill him, and so they questioned him, and to find out, is he not saying something that they could find an excuse to kill him? Then we find there in verse 20, Jesus said, I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in the synagogue and at the temple, and that to me is such an amazing witness of who Jesus was. You know, right to the end, Jesus never left the church. Jesus never left the synagogue. In nowadays, we have many people who's calling us to leave the church, to move on, to find new denominations, and people rightly or self-righteously say that, you know, the church has gone astray. It's true. The church is doing strange things nowadays. Even our own denomination, there are things that's happening in our denomination that makes me cringe when I just think about it, when I just start talking about it. But Jesus was truthful about the church. He called them a brood of vipers. He called them, they were snakes. He called them all these things, but right to the end, he never left the church. Right to the end, he never went away. He kind of remained in the church. He was the light in this dark place. And for us as Christians, as believers, I think there's a massive lesson to be learned in this. But Jesus said that in the synagogues, where all the Jews come together, I said nothing in secret. And again, there is a lesson in us to us that we need to learn to love our lives transparent. We need to live our lives uncomplicated. In the modern days nowadays, we become very complicated in our lives. We've cluttered our lives with many things. We've become manipulative, isn't it? We try to manipulate things around us. And then we have all the excuses in the world to justify it. I mean, I can justify anything from the scriptures if I wish to. But Jesus here says that I live my life transparent. I live my life simple. I live my life open. If you want to see me, here I am. This is what you see, is what you get. And then he says, you can ask two people about me. Surely they know what I've said. Surely they've seen my life. Somebody once said, our deeds speak so loud, I cannot hear what you're saying. And here Jesus is saying that my deeds and my words, they correspond, they speak together. And it's transparent and it's open. And in this Holy Week, we are called to live our lives open and transparent, even in this time. When we say to the world, we do not fear, but we live fearful in the face of Corona. We are not transparent. We say to the world, we live victorious, but we kind of put ourselves in jail. And I'm not talking about living stupid. I'm not talking about doing things wrongly, but you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say to you that we do not live in fear. We live open, we live transparent. We do not, even in the face of the adversity we're facing right now. Let us live our life open and transparent. And then we read there in verse 22, when Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. Isn't it true that the world laughs at us when we say these things? The world will say, oh, well, how is it possible that you as the church, and I keep on hearing it even on the news, that the church often is accused of being the reason why the virus is spreading, and people saying it's the church is not honoring. And I really think that because the church loves, because the church cares, let us show the world that we live in transparency. Let's show the world that we have nothing to fear, that we live in our Lord Jesus Christ, that He already has got the victory for us. And verse 23 says, if I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify, so what it is that is wrong. But I spoke the truth. And on Thursday night, on Wednesday night, we're going to talk about this truth. I spoke the truth. Why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him and bound him to Caiaphas, the high priest. Why? Because he could not find any fault in Jesus. But he had to find an excuse. Why? To crucify him. My friend, when we ponder these things, let us just know the truth. Let us know that Jesus Christ lived a transparent and a true life for you and I. God bless you, keep you. We see you in the next episode.